𝐬𝐲 has been completely laid in place, you may need to cut around certain objects in order to facilitate the border stone, or soldier course, which in this case is copthorn. A small accent of Unilock's legendary Brussels block was also added as an additional border in the center pattern to give the appearance of a carpet design. The easiest way to cut in a soldier course or a border is to mark the distance on the stone with a pencil. Then, use a chalk line to complete the full line. The advantage with a larger stone like 𝐬𝐲 is that it can be easily cut in place. A gas-powered masonry saw with a diamond blade is the most efficient method, but will create dust if you cut it dry. If you cut it wet, you may end up with a white slurry on the stone, which is difficult to clean up unless it is washed off immediately after cutting. Whether you are cutting wet or dry, you must wear NIOSH-approved protective gear at all times. With the proper diamond blade, table saws such as the one illustrated here can be used to cut pavers, wet or dry. A suction unit can be added to the dry cutter that will draw in most of the dust. Keep in mind, because the elements were built off-site, a project of this size has very little cutting, hence very little dust, something your customer will really appreciate. The installation of the copthorn accents will require a slight adjustment to the bedding course thickness. This is simply done by adding a small amount of sand to the area and then screeding it with a pre-cut screed board. This will help spread the correct amount of sand in the area. Because this area is like a channel, the contractor has made a small board that is notched on both ends. Once the adjustment in the bedding course has been made, the copthorn pavers can be installed. In any areas where pavers abut grass or gardens, a plastic or aluminum edge restraint should be used to prevent lateral movement of the pavers into the garden. These edge restraints are spiked into place using 12-inch galvanized spiral nails. Once all the pavers have been cut and the edges are secured, topsoil can then be added to the gardens and then planted. It's almost time for the final compaction, but before it can be started, the entire area must first be swept clean of debris and/or blown off with the leaf blower. The area must also be inspected at this point for line straightness, color blending if your stone is a blend, and the spacing between stones in areas where there are a lot of cuts or fans. After adjusting spacing, a small amount of sand can be put in these areas to prevent shifting of the pattern. One very important note here, do not spread sand on the surface prior to compacting. This will prevent the full flattening of the surface and possibly scuff the pavers as well. On the first compaction pass, compact pavers with no sand in the joints. The nature of 𝐬𝐲's surface is such that a protective membrane should be attached to the bottom of the compactor to prevent scuffing of the surface. These pads are a good investment, and they are available for almost every style of compactor. Compacting should always be done immediately after the pavers have been installed, and not a couple of weeks later. If you wait too long, the pavers will settle into the sand their own way, or rain may cause the sand to shift. As a result, your final compaction will not have the positive outcome that you would like it to have. Compacting accomplishes a couple of things. First, it sets the pavers into the sand, forcing sand up between the joints, creating a very solid lockup between adjacent pavers. Secondly, it flattens the surface by leveling each and every stone to its neighboring stone. A minimum of 3 passes is recommended, once in each direction and once diagonally. Corners and tight areas must be hand tapped. Do not do the final compaction of the pavers if the bedding course is saturated with water from a heavy rain. Instead, wait a day and then compact. After the final compaction is complete, sand may be swept into the joints to lock up the pavers. The sand can be swept in dry, or the sand can be made wet, grouted in like tile grout using an industrial floor squeegee. The weather usually determines which method you use. Never leave jointing sand sitting on the surface for more than a day. Naturally occurring salts in the sand can sometimes stain the stone. Unilock recommends that you use Unilock polymeric sand in almost all situations except on 𝐬𝐲. The unique color fusion surface on 𝐸𝐸 has millions of tiny color particles near the surface that give it its pristine appearance. If you use Unilock polymeric jointing sand on 𝐸𝐸, the fine binders and particulates in the sand will clog the fine color particles, leaving a hazy appearance on the surface of the stone, which cannot be removed very easily. Instead, we recommend that you use standard jointing sand and then apply a coat of solvent-based sealer to bind the sand between the joints. Sealing will enhance the color of the 𝐸𝐸 and the 𝐶𝐵𝐿, giving them a deeper color, but some people prefer the lighter unsealed look. Discuss sealing options with your customer. Offering sealer as an option can be a nice add-on sale for a project, and it'll give the pavers a deep, intense color. At the end of the third day, this contractor finished this project and was ready to move on to the next installation. But before the customer came home from work, their furniture was set up on the patio area. The fire was lit, and some modest decorating was done to impress the customer. Just imagine the look on the customer's face when all this came to pass in only 3 days. The elements, the 𝐸𝐸, and the 𝐶𝐵𝐿 all came together in a well-thought-out design. This addition to the home will certainly become the favorite room of the house. Get on board with the hottest trend in landscaping today. Become an outdoor living specialist. For more information about Unilock elements and installation specs, visit unilockprofessional.com.